Hi all, it's Emily. We're back with another episode of the LPL Corner. I'm happy to be joined by Hysterics, who is play-by-play caster for the LPL English language broadcast. And also, I believe you are one of the broadcast leads, right, for the English
broadcast? At this point, I guess second year, and unfortunately Clement can't be with us because he can't get in at this point. So
yeah.
I wouldn't say broadcast lead. I guess at this point, just a standing caster who's happy to be back for a second year.
Yeah. So just generally, I do want to start with when you guys were looking and prepping at narratives for LPL for this split coming out of MSC. Who were the teams you were looking at? What were kind of some of the major storylines that you want to look at going into summer? And then we'll actually address the state of the standings because it's very funny.
Yeah, it's a bit different at the moment. But coming out of MSC, we're especially... we took a lot away from MSC, or at least I did. I think Lyric, who was the caster who didn't actually do MSC, looked at it as okay, it's like Rift Rivals again. We're not going to look at the teams that came through as the be-all, end-all of the team. We have to take something away from it. But me especially, I looked at MSC as, this is the MSI that we didn't get from the two best regions that I keep saying, because I realistically believe LCK is the second best region still. That's controversial. But I took away that, okay, Top Esports are now the best team. JDG is now second, even though Spring Finals leads you to believe that JDG are the best. I think I got the message that the LPL has, this depth of talent that our top four is so stacked. Okay, top three is so stacked because IG was a bad
IG really isn't top four anymore at all. But
I really can't put them there at all. Hey, but we moved from spring to summer saying, okay, depth of talent still there. Top Esports new leader, the individual stacked roster, and even Yu Yanjiao who performed there as well. We kind of adapted our narrative to say that, coming into summer with an actual split, teams had time to prepare and teams had time to actually scrim and practice and be what they should have been in spring, but couldn't be because of that really, really short schedule due to COVID.
So looking at the standings, Victory 5 is definitely the team that we all expected to be in first place at this point. So, as has been said in chat, has also been said by Lyric on Twitter and in several other places, including here on the show, where he said, without knowing the lineup, that Victory 5 was going to be a playoff team in summer. V5 is not just an LPL team. They're an idea, a dream of what could be. It's not about the difficulties you're facing right now, but the hidden potential inside. In a way, there's some Victory 5 in all of us, and we're all Victory 5.
Oh, dear Lord. I mean, he had so much faith in this team, and in his power rankings, I think he still put them quite low, but he said at one point he had them as high as 13th or 12th, simply because it was an upgrade in the roster, but no one thought they'd be here. And it doesn't matter about their schedule. OMG and DMO aren't the biggest teams to beat, but no one thought V5 would start 2-0 and top the charts with a 100% win rate for series.
Yeah, so I think Lyric's faith in V5 came from his overwhelming ride or die. He will ride or die for Mole, without question. I wrote in my column as kind of a joke. I was find someone who loves you as much as Lyric loves Mole, because you will have accomplished a lot in life if you can find that. But honestly, the thing that has changed the most about this team for me is they've stopped just plugging in Mole in literally every position possible, because that was their spring to me. It was Mole is the best player. We know that. And he's going to play literally every position to see if he can carry us hard enough from one of these positions to make it.
And it was just so, that was fine at first, because especially Mole's diversity in champion pool, he'd carry on something like Lucian mid or Zoe, but then it got to the point where he was just filling to the bottom lane. They're putting CLX mid, because CLX was actually not the worst mid lane. I think CLX is a talented player. Mole went Nico bot too many times, like more than once, was way too many times. And we got to this point where, like, you know, V5 were changing up their roles, but it didn't really mean anything, even like changing up their drafts as well and bringing out these crazy compositions. But with Mole's instability came the whole of V5's instability. That's personally why I think like the 0-16 spring dream came through, because you couldn't lean on Mole anymore. Alias was a consistent member, but top didn't matter, and the rest of the map fell apart.
Yeah.
So now Mole's playing a lot better.
I was gonna say, I'll stand by the fact that I actually think Alias has some talent. Like, I hope he goes on and performs like as well as he can, because I think he showed some signs of actually like potential even when V5 was losing. I think the two players everyone wants to talk about are Samdi, who came from Gen G trainee system, and PP God, not only because his name is hilarious when said in English, but also because because he's been performing insanely well. So what intel did you guys have on these? Like, how were you prepping to talk about V5 before? I just want to see if you had any extra info on them that we didn't as viewers.
Sam D was a question mark, because, you know, like we've had many players who've come into the LPL who've come through like LCK systems or like trainee systems, or a great example of that is someone like Cryan, who you remember in spring debuted on Easter. Before that, he was a trainee under Xiaohu and RNG. He was a great example of a player that it was like, we have no expectations, because sure, he could be a good player because he was under RNG, or he could be a talent 5 years down the track. And then he performed well, and we're like, okay, great, like this training system works. Sam D, low expectations again. We just kind of left it up to the wind. PP God, we had intel. It sound like a secret agent. We had intel that PP God, coming out of FPX Blaze, out of the LPL, that top esports were trying to scout him. That all these other teams were actually trying to get onto him, and the trade didn't go through for whatever reason. And then going to V5, we're like, okay, obviously he can't be that good. And he comes in with Sam D, and like as this bottom lane, a synergizing bottom lane, which, as you know, in the LPL from LWX and Chris, from Puff and Southwind, when you get those 2v2 bottom lanes that actually work well together, they create like such a big dynamic within their team. So that's what Sam D and PP God have done. And funnily enough, like this 2v2 bottom lane, I think is one of the better ones in the LPL. I actually rate this bottom lane pretty highly. And if they continue like this, it'll be quick for me to put them on the top 8.
So I was shocked because not only are they a bot lane that hadn't played together, really. It's not like they're coming in even like Yuyanja and Fodic did in the beginning. Although I guess they kind of split them up pretty early and tried to pair Fodic off with Chocho, despite the fact that he didn't work out. And then Yuyanja has had his own struggles on top esports, so I can actually see why they'd be scouting someone like PP God. But not only that, they, Samdi's coming over from South Korea, so we don't know if there's going to be like any sort of language or cultural barrier there. And they seem to work insanely well together, which is, like you said, awesome to see, but like incredibly unexpected. I think that. Yeah, like them with Weiwei. I actually never thought Weiwei was bad, but I also didn't think he was like...
Oh, he wasn't good. He wasn't great.
Exactly. Like, I was like, it's one of those things where LPL junglers are so difficult sometimes when you're looking at young junglers, because you're like, okay, I can see theoretically how maybe down the line you could be good, but right now you're inting, you're not paying attention to vision, you're not paying attention to your lane states, stuff like that. And on V5, he's looked a lot different. So, like, I'm just wondering who is Mole shot calling on this team? Is the arrival of Assassin, who, like, I don't know how much people know about Assassin. He was actually, weirdly enough, when I first started watching LPL, like, religiously in season 5, he was on Team King, I believe. He's gone through several iterations of his name. He was previously known as Sask or JS, and then Assassin later on. I thought he was actually going to be super, super good. That did not work out so well. But I feel like we also can't discredit the fact that we have Wei coming in. I don't know if he's a voice. We have this bot lane that magically synergized together despite not playing together before. And then a new head coach. And I don't know how much Assassin is talking to the team, but it seems to be a net positive for everyone.
Yeah, he was playing in the PCS up until recently, last split on Alpha Esports. So he's still very experienced, and it's kind of funny he comes out of nowhere and just joins this team. If you're talking about comms, if you look in the face cams in the LPL summer, PP God is very vocal. So I still don't know who's calling his team, but like Lyric and I said this on cast, that PP God looks really, really vocal to the point of like an influential shot caller. And so
that'd be awesome. Just this rookie support is just steering this entire team like he's the next Mako or something.
PP God is one of a kind. But you can see his cam, like he's really, really vocal. And before, I believe it was Mole who was kind of dictating this team. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a balance between him and PP God, but I guess Weiwei is a big question as well. I want to come back because you talk about Weiwei's performance just quickly. Somehow, not only he, but Bubu as well has actually been playing better when he also in Suning was not great. So I don't know what's happened. It's like they've all been elevated by V5. It just came out of left field.
Well, they face LGD tonight. Based on their actual like in-game performance and strength of schedule, I'd still put them as a middling team. Obviously, I'd still put like the likes of JDG, Top, RNG, depending on how you feel about RNG. But I mean, I still think RNG are really good. I'd put them in the middle. I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not really sure. It's kind of like E-Star last year, where I'm like, is this going to be another team that teams are just going to let kind of squeak by, and then they're going to get figured out towards the end and fall off a bit? We'll see. Yeah. Who wins against V5 versus the new LGD lineup, which I am still not sold on, by the way.
We all put LGD, and I agree. I mean, a lot of us in the cast. I think Dagda he put LGD in the top 4, so he's very sold on this matchup.
Wow.
But we've all kind of flipped a bit to V5.
Okay, because I was wondering if like Lyric was gonna even go with the V5 pick.
Oh, he will. He wants V5. He didn't put it on predictions, but he thinks V5 genuinely is going to bring it up. But LGD, yeah, I'm not sure. I think we've got to roll into this roster a bit more in the split. But yeah, I don't know. I think we've only seen one series. Yeah, we've only seen one series out of them. So who knows? I would look at this as like one of the matches of the week, by the way. Which again, I never thought I'd say between LGD and V5 coming into it regular season.
I still don't know how I feel about this LGD lineup because I have trouble believing in LGD, regardless of what they look like on paper. I'm glad they picked up Mark because I actually think Mark is like really good. I don't know if that's like a controversial opinion, but I actually think he's a really good support. I think he's performed well even when his team hasn't previously. And I think Kramer is still really good despite the fact that he had like kind of a rough split last split. Sure. I think this is good jungle meta for Peanut actually. Currently. And then Longxi, how do you feel about Longxi?
Longxi has been done dirty on RNG. I don't care what people say. All the fans did him dirty, and now New's in that roster, and they're like, oh my god, New's so much better. But you give it a couple of weeks, they'll start bagging out New. They'll start saying New's the problem as well, even without an Uzi roster.
Are people aware that New is Meow? Because Meow got like universally panned for his Vici performances.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's why he changed his name. He literally knew he wanted a new start, so he wants to put that in the past. But yeah, Longxi has been done dirty, and I honestly think that he's still a great top laner. I think this is like one of the better pickups for LGD. They needed a strong top because I've never believed in Lies. I don't think Lies is a great top laner purely because the fact that a lot of the time Lies can be quite coin flippy. He and Yuki, I looked at him like these are coin flippy players. Yuki actually, especially towards last year and spring as well. So I don't know. I just don't see the faith in the old roster, but Langxing is just so much better as an individual player. And even Garvey, who is a carry top laner, who's like Irelia is his, most played pick and actually looks great on it from time to time. This is just so much better. Like, and Langxing and Garvey to bounce between those two is a good dynamic for LGD.
I just think it's funny how people become RNG top laners and then suddenly they look a lot different and they end up getting criticized heavily by the general community. Let's move on to Team WE in second. I actually don't have a ton to say about WE because they've performed like in game exactly as I've expected. In terms of their drafting, in terms of the way they play around Teacher Ma. The majority of people watching LPL for the first time in week 1, most of their questions to me on Twitter were, why is someone playing Aurelion Sol? And I had to explain that was just like a Teacher Ma special, and every champ he plays is Aurelion Sol in some way. But how, like for that framework, like I feel like what I'm seeing out of Team WE is pretty much exactly what I expected. I do think they can be a playoff team. Right now I don't see them again challenging the likes of a powered up RNG, a powered up FPX, a powered up JDG or TES. How do you feel about WE right now?
I mean, the biggest thing that's gating them from being like, top 4 team rather than a top 8, because I definitely expect them to be in playoffs. If WE aren't in playoffs, something will have gone wrong. In my power rankings, I put them in 8th, just under E-Star, which again was a bit controversial. But it's like this simple dynamic of like, running a comp that flows with the wind. That's what the Chinese casters call it. I was talking with Teddy, one of the casters on their side, and he's like, we call them comps that flow with the wind because essentially it's like the Galio pick or it's the Aurelion Sol. It's revolving mid around the rest of the map and getting Teacher Ma involved and like freeing up his lane in a sense, but also, having this like this wombo based on a unique identity champion pool from Teacher Ma. So it's a lot of fun to watch, but it's very predictable and you can just bat out Teacher Ma, and the draft for WE doesn't quite look the same. I think they got away with murder in the series versus was it versus Suning? No, it was versing EDG. I think for like game 2 and 3, they got away with murder with some of the draft with Teacher Ma getting a little bit too much bit freedom. But the problem is like diversity in draft is always going to gate these guys. And if WE don't really want to adapt, if they don't want to change their style or find more dynamics to play through, then they're never going to reach the likes of Top Esports and JDG. But they are like one of the funnest teams to watch because while predictable, like their comps are just so much fun watching team fight in the mid to late game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that WE can make playoffs. I think they need to show something else that we haven't seen yet in order for them to
Shanks, right?
Contend for a title.
Could be through the new mid laner out of the LDL.
Yeah, if they can bring him in. And I think one credit I'll give is I think Jomung has looked better than I expected. I was kind of like not down on him, but I was like, he's okay. Like he's pretty good.
Yeah.
Has flashes of brilliance, has flashes of not brilliance. And even in some of his team fights this past week, for some of the team fight micro, I was like, you could auto attack a little bit more, maybe, or get in there a little bit more at certain times. But I do think Jomung has looked better thus far this summer.
He's more confident, like flashing forward in a fight, for example, right? Jomung was, I don't know, I guess a savior of Flash at some point during spring. I think Jomung has just kind of found his comfort zone in WE, which is nice because he was by far the weakest member on this roster, then Bei Shang. And finding the pieces and like the individuality is good.
Moving down the standings, let's take a look at RNG. I actually think this team's going to be pretty good, despite the loss to LNG, which we'll talk about in a moment, or we can talk about them in tandem, because LNG is a team that I kind of did not believe in last week and was pretty open about it because they were not starting Flandra. But as it turns out, I think the absence of Flandra's voice has definitely changed what the team has looked like. I maintain that they looked like solo queue in their first game, and then have subsequently looked a lot more cohesive in their next 2 series. I think Maple is performing way better than I thought he would. Honestly. Like, I did not think... Like, I've seen Maple for a really long time when he was on Flash Wolves, but I kind of assumed after last split, I was like, okay, this is kind of the end of his career. He's, you know, he's kind of winding down. We're not gonna see some of those like highlight plays from Maple anymore. And he's actually showed up. He's performed really, really well for LNG thus far. So good on him. I also like this RNG like lineup. It's always really difficult to talk about RNG without Uzi I, like without knowing that Uzi I is going to come in and just kind of be on the team. But I think Betty is still really good. And I don't know how much criticism he received on Chinese forums, to be honest. I don't know if you saw any of it. Like, I didn't really see a lot of in the West people blaming Betty for RNG's struggles last split. It was more talking about Xiaohu and how streaky he was and how inconsistent he was. But Xiaohu has also looked pretty good to start.
Xiaohu's looked okay. I think there were a couple of moments, especially during the last series of like LNG in game one, like starting off the game where Xiaohu just got caught walking blindly when there's no one on the map. And moments like that are not great. I didn't see too much criticism for Betty, but I know there would have been, especially from the Chinese side. Like replacing Uzi and, you know, moving into that position so hard. But Betty has been and was in spring when RNG toward the end of the split were like falling flat, was one of the most consistent members. And I think he deserves a lot of credit because as an 80 carry, he is still like one of the more consistent members and one of the more consistent players in the LPL. So I think Betty's just kind of going to have to find his own limelight within this team, especially now that Uzi's gone. It's like, this is your 80 carry. You don't have an option to see Uzi. Like, it's not the maybe Uzi will come back. It's always going to be Betty now. You have to deal with it. But yeah, this is a nice surprise coming into summer. RNG was the team I put like 9th or 10th because they just...
Oh, really?
They failed. The spring looks so bad. And I know Lyric could talk more about this and Dagda as well, but like the drafting towards the end of spring was so questionable. Compositions with 2 different directions, like they didn't make sense. And when you have someone like Mato who's coaching this roster, you go, and Tabe as well, who, you know, was on the spring finals desk in 2019 and has been a player and a coach for a while. You're like, what is actually happening within the system here in RNG?
Do you think we'll see Cryan? Because the loss of Cryan for E-Star, in my opinion, is actually really massive.
It is. Yeah.
Do you think like RNG kind of reclaiming him back as their own? Do you think he starts, or do you think he's like? I see teams sometimes bringing in a player like him to put pressure on an existing player who has struggled, which would be Xiaohu. Do we think that is the case here? Do we think Cryan is going to start?
I think we've seen one series. I think we've seen 1 or 2 series. Honestly, it's sad, but I don't expect him to come in like much more than like a couple of games for the regular season, unless there's a new dynamic built where like Cryan offers something that Xiaohu doesn't. But it's not like Teachamar and Shanks from WE, where even though we haven't seen Shanks is like an assassin player. Like he plays a lot of meta. Yeah, he's completely
different.
Yeah. 2 different champion pools. They add different dynamics to the team. Like, what does Cryan add that Xiaohu might not? You know, so it's sad to see him on the back burner of a team, but I think that's the harsh reality of it, that Cryan won't be seen much, and that really sucks. He deserves to be on a starting roster of a team. He's one of the better mid laners here in the LPL, and RNG have just kind of cuddled him for now to hold on.
Yeah, I mean, I also worry a bit about the RNG top lane situation because I'm not super sold on New. I think 705 when he did play performed better than I expected, but also wasn't. I mean, saying he wasn't as good as Zoom is like really unfair. But I also don't think that he was, and I've said this before on the show. I don't think he was as good even as like Morgan, who was also Zoom's backup for a bit. So
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm curious to see what happens when they do start getting pressured a bit more on top side. I think Xiaolong Bao's looked a bit better. This also, again, when we're talking about junglers, could maybe be a slightly better meta for him because the jungle meta right now is pretty interesting with more farming solutions. So you can do you can either do like mid-game skirmishes if you want, or you could just wait to do like full-out 5v5 team fights, which we've seen previously be RNG's kind of MO, along with 1-3-1 comps. So we shall see. I still think RNG are like, it's always really hard for me to write out RNG completely, just again due to their pedigree. And I know that also shouldn't be the case in my mind now because Uzi is no longer part of that, and he kind of was that pedigree for a lot of it. So
agreed.
Let's talk a little bit more about LNG. Okay. RNG last night. As has been said in chat, Chunlin was apparently performing a lot better than Flounder and Scrims, which is another reason that they wanted him to start. But this team, after their first series, where I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be really rough," because it looked like, I mean, that LNG Sinning series was.
Oh, they looked horrible. Oh, they sucked.
It wasn't great for either team, in my opinion, and they've both looked better since that series. So I don't know if they just had to like get it out of their system or what. But in that match, LNG looked like solo queue to me. Like it looked like an actual solo queue game.
Yeah, and there was no confidence there. I think LNG's like a team that, because of how it's been put together, is going to look like that for a little bit, even if it's good or bad, right? Chenlun is a nice surprise. You brought it up. Chenlun has actually been a pretty decent, and I guess I'd say rather consistent top laner.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the question I have now is, I think a lot of their success is going to depend on how well Maple can continue playing. Because I think some of their issues previously were that Maple was really streaky. And again, like I don't like to like be super hard on Maple because he was another one of those Flash Wolves players I really wanted to have success in the LPL after Flash Wolves broke up. But I thought he was really inconsistent and not great in spring. And I think and like just a really not great champion pool. Like he only looked good on a few champs, and then outside of that, he really struggled as well. What do you think of XX?
Oh, he and Maple, like, I mean, the issue was putting them together. At the very least, seeing XX and Maple, you know, try and build up like the mid jungle 2v2 was part of the issue, at least for LNG, especially towards spring. XX has played a lot better though. I will say, like, XX has been a lot more consistent, a lot more aggressive. He has been playing a lot more around his side lanes, which is kind of nice. And it does feel like, because XX in top esports, if you ever remember, like last year, especially in 2019, XX's comms, like this guy was the shot call. Like XX was the person who was so damn loud. I remember hearing him from the where I was standing, hosting the desk, and I remember I could hear this glorious yell, right, coming from the side, and like this is over like a crowd and everything. I just hear this burst of energy. XX is a loud player. He has given direction to this team, and in a way, I think he's also like bolstered the players like Light and Dwan, because on top of XX, Light has also looked a lot better. Now, Light wasn't the starting AD carry. It was, you know, Asura and Dwan, who I was really high on in 2019 summer. That kind of, you know, let me down a little bit in playoffs, but Light has actually looked like one of the better AD carries. And I think they've got a lot of direction towards bot. So this is good that LNG actually know what they're doing and like what they're setting out for. And Light and Dwan performing better is a good sign that you have a strong lane to play through on a team that originally really did not.
Yeah, I think for me it's all about Maple, because I also think that part of the reason why XX has looked better is because Maple has been a lot more stable. I think I'm maybe slightly more down on him than you are. Chunlin is nice though. That's been a nice surprise. Let's see who else is up here. I mean, JDG and Top have only each played once. They're at 1-0. So like another thing that people need to remember, not only strength of schedule with the current standings, I'm just really using them as a chance to talk about teams. JDG and TES have only each played one series. TES should not have won that game one, but they still did, and they won that entire series without their starting AD. So I think TES are, I mean, in my opinion, they're the best team in China right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Based on nothing that we've seen thus far in summer, or I mean, it could be based on what you've seen in summer, because they still beat, Rogue Warriors without actually starting what I would consider their like championship caliber lineup with Jackie Love. So, I don't know. I think this is finally, if it's anyone's split, it's TES's split. Like I want to see them win a title.
For sure.
I think the only thing I'm unsure about is Yanja.
Yes. Yeah. At MSC, at least in the MSC finals, he looked better. I mean, that was like a moment of brilliance for him, where he was on technically an international stage, and his first ever international stage, and he performed. And like for Top Esports as well, taking off how they performed at MSC, like the 3-0 versus Gen G, 3-1 versus FPX in the finals. And then, okay, the game one aside, game two of Top Esports versus Rogue Warriors, like that's what you take. Because game two was an absolute smack.
Yeah.
Night was so big, and the whole of Top Esports just slaughtered Rogue Warriors. And it was like, this is the level of skill difference, and this is actually how it will be without Jackie Love. So, yeah, even though Chocho is an AD carry of the past, and he wasn't too bad in the series, I think he was fine. He hasn't played AD carry in a while, remember? It's been like a year and a bit. So
he was whatever. He was, I mean, my opinion is don't start Chocho AD carry against a team that's better than Rogue Warriors. Would be my opinion there. But I think the big thing for TES, and the reason outside of Jackie Love and everything he brings as an individual player, and also everything he brings as a voice on the team, I am looking forward to seeing Karsa and Knight continue their improved mid-jungle synergy, because that's what I was actually really harping on this team for most of spring. I was like, how did these two talented players seem to have like negative communication? Like you put them together and it's a net loss for like the first half of spring, I'd say, is they had a lot of issues.
Like, I don't understand. I mean, I couldn't understand it myself, because spring, they're being harped up as like the next best mid-jungle duo. It was like, Doomby and Tien are great, but have you seen Karsa and Knight together? And that never happened. And now we're getting in summer, and actually we got an MSC. We got Karsa playing a lot more around, like, well, he'll always go up towards 369. He has this tendency to hit top lane, but he would also balance that, and he'd shadow mid a lot more. We'd see him hovering around Knight, which is great. And the communication's obviously there now. And even without Jackie Love playing against Rogue Warriors, like those comms stayed. So whatever's changed towards MSC, whatever's been adapted, and of course, like towards finals, like after that period of time, now Karsa and Knight no longer have a problem. And as a 2v2, they're actually like now hitting that top 1, top 2. Yeah, insane. Great word for it.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always been a 369 fan, so I'm happy to see him finally getting some recognition from the international community after MSC, because
top 2.
He's always been, I think he caught my eye in, I believe, Demacia Cup last year, and I was like, oh, this kid like has a lot of talent, because I unfortunately don't have time to watch LDL I try to bug people who do.
No one does.
I know
No one
Raz
does.
was my one
There's
holdout,
no
and now
way.
he like doesn't have time. So because he's coaching with Golden Guardians. So, but yeah, I think we're kind of running out of time. So I don't know. Is there one other team that you kind of wanted to touch on? And I'll ask chat for questions as well.
Okay. I mean, I want the 2 cents on IG. I just need to say two things about IG. Right. As someone who has cast them now and is Rookie is 1v90. Wait for so we're doing a segment tomorrow. So IG versus Suning is tomorrow, and I'm doing a segment with Lyric. I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy it, but it's a highlight on Rookie versus everyone else with like IG, right? Because Rookie is trying to carry this team right now. The Shy is inting. Ning is doing some questionable stuff. Puff and Southwind are even getting into the chaos a bit and kind of losing their minds. I don't know what I think of IG, but I truly am starting to believe that even after only one series, that IG are like on the downward spiral. I think this is it. Unless something drastic changes, I think Rookie's going to get dragged down with them. I honestly don't believe in IG as like a top 4 team anymore, and calling them a top 8 is even risky at this point as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think IG, when we saw them succeed, I still think that Puff and Southwind did kind of go a bit unchallenged, I guess. Like, I think I'll say this: if there's some credit I want to give Spring IG, it's that they ingratiated them onto the roster really well, and I think it hid a lot of their mistakes as a duo. Especially with Puff, a little bit less with Southwind, in my opinion. I don't know if that's controversial. I think that Southwind is the better laning partner, but
no, I agree.
I think that they had a lot of weaknesses that did go unchallenged, despite the fact that the ease with which they seemed to fit with the team was really impressive. And now with the Shy performing, like, it just seems like he does not care or doesn't. I don't know. I don't know what's up with it. Like, we've always known that the Shy can overextend, right, and get caught out, but that does not seem to be, like, the mistakes of the past do not seem to be what's happening here. And Ning, I feel like people already know my opinion on Ning, so I'll move on. Rookie, I feel bad for because he's an incredibly talented player, and he is stuck on this team for now. And then Puff and Southwind, I actually don't think they're, like, I think people vacillate wildly between Spring. People are like, they're insane, and then now people are like, they're trash. I think the reality is somewhere in the middle, and I think this is still their first year on a top team. I thought they were some of the better performers on BG previously. And I think they still have a lot of room to improve, but I don't think they're like actively terrible. I do think it would help if they were on a team that didn't have so many other issues right now. Specifically, I think IG have, if they can't rely on both of their solo laners to be performing really well, then they just fall apart. And they've never been a team that I would consider to be a particularly like macro focused team to begin with. Like that wasn't how they were beating people. They were beating people by having really strong lanes and then fighting all the time. And drafting to that too. Like their red side draft was like the thing that we called attention to for them all of 2018. Yeah. Now they're just like, I have no idea.
They're just like, let's, this wins lane. Let's try this. If it doesn't, we'll keep fighting, and we're going to, try and outweigh the odds into our favor. And at the moment, it really doesn't. Like, you should see the combined deaths on this team. Even like the Shy personally. We said this on broadcast in spring. The Shy now has more career deaths than kills, and it's actually getting outweighed very quickly. Like, really quickly. Its deaths are stacking up. I think he's like 100 or almost 200 over his career kills now. Like, that's that is saying something about the world's best top laner, who I don't think should get that title anymore.
Yeah, I mean, not with 369 and Zoom in your same league. And even arguably a lot of other tops. Well, thank you for ending on, the downer note of IG. I guess we did have to touch upon them. Thank you so much for joining me. We have to cut out for a few reasons. One of them being that LCS actually starts in 20 minutes. And I do not want to run into LCS. I'll ask chat if there's any questions that you guys have before we go out. Man, IG just make me sad because I think this is always coming just based on IG's playstyle, right? Like if they couldn't just draft like pushing lanes, really strong laning matchups, especially on red side, and then rely on the individual talent of their players, it was going to come crashing down at some point. It's just sad to watch it happen.
It's just
here we go. Will DMO win a game?
Yes. Yes. It'll come crashing down in the way BLG are. They'll beat BLG and probably OMG. They'll find one. They'll find one or two, but they will be a bottom 3 team, I can say very calmly.
See, I thought it was really miraculous that V5 went through without winning a series, to be honest, because that's actually super hard to do in LPL. Like, usually you will be able to take advantage of another team at some point because everyone, you have a lot of teams that hard focus on something, or they just have no semblance of macro play, or like the depth of the LPL is really high, but you also have some, like, at the bottom, you typically have some, like, really, a lot of teams that are struggle life. And there we go. Inconsistency is a nice way to say it. Which is why I actually think it's really hard to go through an LPL split without winning a game. So, I mean, congrats to you, V5, because in my opinion, you achieved the impossible last spring. V5 World's champs. We'll end on that. I'll say no. I think we'll be lucky if V5 actually sustain this to make playoffs. I like V5. I think they're interesting to watch, and I love watching. Like my weakness is watching young talent in LPL, right? Like succeed. Like I love that. I loved watching eStar last split for the same reason, but I also think they're going to be like a middling team at best.
Yeah, I wouldn't put V5 at Worlds. Put them into top 8 maybe. Again, you're right. It's about like maintaining this. They haven't versed a team that in their form is looking like a top 8 team, right? That's LGG potentially, but even then we still got to wait a bit. So I think it's a bit early, memes aside.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Good luck on the broadcast for this weekend. Hopefully, I think you said you don't cast until tomorrow.
JDG top 8.
Right?
So,
nice.
Yeah.
That'll be good. So Suning versus, you have to get through Suning versus IG first. But then,
Yeah. Gotta work for it.
I know. But thank you so much for joining me. And for more general League of Legends esports coverage, keep it here on ESPN Esports. Thank you.